That's me. But like I said, you know what I look like. So, anyways, thanks, Basam, for arranging this. Let me take my watch off, so hopefully. All right. So I'm going to be talking about elections in Pakistan this summer. I was there doing fieldwork for a totally different project. It was on sort of rebel groups and so on. But I happened to be there in fact, I got there the day before the election. And this was the first time I ever voted, actually, anywhere. I'm not a US citizen yet, so I can't vote here, which really annoys me because I've been paying taxes for 15 years. But in Pakistan, I wasn't able to vote in 2008 because I was in grad school, and it happened during the semester. And I couldn't vote in 2013 because I was working, and again, it happened during the semester. And we didn't have elections before 2008. So this was, the first time I voted, so I felt very good about it. All the civic pride and all. But anyways, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what happened in the elections, maybe a little bit about the aftermath and a little bit of the context. So let me start with the context. Obviously, Pakistan, it's obviously had lots of issues with being consistently democratic over the last many decades, basically since independence. Unlike India, which has for all but 2 years been a constitutional democracy for its entire political history, Pakistan has not. In fact, about half of its time has been under the rule of military governments, and the other half has been under civilian governments. But even those civilian governments are often pressured and not allowed to do their job by the military intelligence agencies. So the point is that Pakistan has had a very checkered history with democracy. And one of the reasons it's had a checkered history with democracy, not just the army's role, but political parties are often very happy to and often eager to get in bed with the army to take on their other political rivals, right? So if you have two mainstream parties in the 1990s, one was called the PPP, and is called the PPP, and the other one is called the PMLN. When the PPP would come to power, the PMLN would get in bed with the army and say, let's get rid of these guys. And when the PMLN would come into power, then the PPP. And so it was just the civilian parties weren't really carrying forth the idea of democracy and civilian rule. When in 2006, both mainstream parties, or the leaders of both mainstream parties, the late Benazir Bhutto, who was assassinated in 2007, and Nawaz Sharif, who's currently in jail, signed what was called the Charter of Democracy. And amongst other things, the 2006 Charter of Democracy said, we screwed up in the past. We've lost sight of the bigger picture. The bigger picture is civilian supremacy. And we are not going to ally with the military to get rid of one another. And, democracy is very important. And so this was a very important marker in Pakistan's political history. It happened during military rule. But the following two elections were building towards a more democratic system. Pakistan had two free and fair elections consecutively for the first time in 2008 and 2013. From a poli-sci perspective, two consecutive free and fair elections is very, very important, right? Any country can have one free and fair election. It's not that hard to have one free and fair election. The real challenge is to having that second free and fair election, because the transfer of power is really what makes a democracy, right? It's not the elections per se, it's peaceful transfer of power. Predictable and peaceful transfer of power. So Pakistan had that in 2013. It was the first time that a Pakistani parliament had completed its term in 70 years, which is a pretty major accomplishment. And so, yes, Pakistan had all sorts of internal problems, and we can get into that, but the idea that it was building towards something. Well, unfortunately, 2018 was not a completely free and fair election, so that positive trajectory was broken, primarily because the army and the new kid on the block, the PTI party, were essentially allies and got rid of the incumbent Nawaz Sharif and PMLN. The PTI is not party to the Charter of Democracy. It's a very iconoclastic, we are the new kid on the block, you guys are the corrupt elites, and we will take you down. And they have a reasonably fresh message, and I'm not going to quibble with their politicking. But the point is that they got in bed with the army. And they were happy to, and not just for the elections, but even in 2013, 2014, when the PMLN first came to power, the PTI was out in the streets pressuring them, this, that, the other, with the help of the ISI and their money, intelligence agencies and their money. So the context here is that Pakistan's trajectory towards democracy was shaken, if not entirely broken. Okay, so what happens in these 2018 elections? Let me just talk very quickly about 4 or 5 of the major parties. First of all, you have PTI that won. PTI is led by Imran Khan. You might have seen him on television, very charismatic figure, very popular figure. Has, his main sort of agenda is, anti-corruption. That's how he's defined himself. That, I'm a clean guy. Like, that's the idea. I think he has sort of fairly right-wing tendencies as well. I got in trouble for saying so. Not really trouble, but I got in trouble. Yeah, I got a little bit of trouble for saying so. But yeah, he's, I'm willing to give him a shot. It's fine. The only issue is, his relationship with the military and his relationship with Islamists sort of gives me pause. But anyway, the PTI went from roughly 30 seats. So Pakistan has roughly in the sort of open non-reserved seats, which are for minorities and women, the open seats. There are about 270 open seats in parliament. The PTI won 30 seats last time, which is basically not much. It was the third biggest party in 2013. This time it won 115, right? So it went up by about 80. Most pre-poll predictions had them at about 85, 90 seats. So there's like that 25 seat margin, which you can ascribe to good luck or you can ascribe to election tampering. I would do the latter. So they would have won anyway, but they sort of the margin of their victory was enlarged by the military and intelligence agencies. The second biggest party is the PMLN. This was a former incumbent. These were the guys who were in power from 2013 to 2018. They faced real headwinds. There were a couple of things. Number one, the army was against them. Number two, the judiciary was against them. And there were sort of internal battles as well. It's a sort of family-oriented party. So one brother who runs the party with the other brother who runs the party, both have sort of children who are interested in running the party in the future. And so, there have been conflicts within the family on the party. And then, the issue of corruption is a real thing, right? These guys are actually corrupt and they've been gotten in trouble with the judiciary. Nawaz Sharif is in jail, or recently was in jail. His daughter was recently in jail. And they were in jail during the elections. And the other thing I would say about the PMLN is they were restricted primarily to one province in Pakistan, the biggest province, Punjab, but still just one province. So they were facing all sorts of headwinds: the corruption issue, the judiciary allied with the street, allied with the army, and the fact that sometimes this sort of people get sick of the incumbent. So they went from about 140 seats last time. They had a massive majority to about 60, 65 seats this time. The third biggest party is the PPP. They went from about 30 seats last time to about 40 seats this time. Their leader, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, the son of Asif Zardari and Benazir Bhutto, the late Benazir Bhutto, he's, amongst, no, I wouldn't call a single party in Pakistan liberal or progressive because they don't even come close. But to the extent that you can point to specific leaders or specific parties and say, okay, this person embodies some sort of progressive or liberal principles, this guy would be it, right? So he says all the right things. And the reports of their demise have been greatly exaggerated. So these guys ran the national government from 2008 to 2013, suffered a pretty hellacious loss in 2013, and were basically consigned to one small region of the country in Sindh. And that's where they are now. So people thought that downward trajectory would continue, but not only did it hold steady, but they actually won about 10 more seats than last time. The point is they're not dead yet. They're that sort of third force. But then again, they're also a far cry from what they used to be. Two other parties I'll talk about. One is the MQM, which is sort of a Karachi-based party. They don't win a lot of national seats, but they win enough to control Karachi, which is really important because it's the biggest city in Pakistan and the most economically prosperous, and controls a lot of, it's basically the sort of vein of Pakistan's economy. Controlling Karachi gives you a lot of leverage. The MQM has historically, or at least for the last 40 years, controlled Karachi, not just through the ballot box, but through the gun and sort of there's an election machine of the MQM and there's a violence machine of the MQM, and they're sort of melded, and that's how they've controlled Karachi for 40 years. That control was broken in this election. We can talk in Q&A, I guess, about sort of what happened. But they went to about 5 or 6 seats, and partly because of, I'll just leave it at that. Finally, the religious parties. Religious parties have never done one in Pakistan's elections. They've never won more than 10% of the vote. This time they got completely wiped out. They haven't won many seats, but there is a new religious party called the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, which is worth thinking about because they didn't win. They won 0 seats. That's important to underline. But they won the 5th most votes in the country, right? So they came 3rd and 4th in a lot of constituencies. Is the point. Which you can read one of two ways. You can say, look, they never win, so that's good. But the things that they're saying and the fact that they're coming 3rd and 4th again would Maybe they come second and third next time. Maybe they come first and second the time after that. Who knows? This is a sort of party formed in the aftermath of the assassination of Salman Taseer, who was a governor in 2013. The point is, it's sort of an anti-blasphemy party. We can talk about the context of what that means in Pakistan, but they've been, gotcha. They've been, the roots of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan lie in the sort of blasphemy, anti-blasphemy controversy in Pakistan. Not really a controversy, but anyway. Okay, let me just talk very quickly about the aftermath, especially in foreign policy economics. So Imran Khan's primary message sort of coming to power was the reason Pakistan is poor and the reason that we face the problems we do is because the leaders are corrupt, the elite is corrupt, and I am going to, even though he himself is very elite and went to Oxford and studied in England, so on and so forth, played cricket for 25 years. Even though he's very elite, he represents sort of the idea of sort of a middle class sort of, base. The problem is he had very simplistic and ham-handed ideas about what plagues Pakistan's, economy and politics, right? The idea that you can, he keeps talking about Swiss banks and money stored in Swiss banks. The idea that you can, first of all, get money back from Swiss banks. And secondly, that the money that you do get back from Swiss banks is going to take care of your problems is just completely fanciful. So, reality has hit him in the head. He was saying, why do we have to go to the IMF? Why do we have to go to the IMF? When I come to power, I'm going to solve everything. So, doing things like his personal austerity measures, selling off the BMWs that the Prime Minister's house used to have or whatever. Very, very sort of populist type measures. I'm going to sell BMWs and fix the deficit. Like, that's not how that works, right? The scale is just totally warped. So the people who actually can step in are things like the entities like the IMF and Saudi Arabia, rather than selling off BMWs or getting money from Swiss banks. But the problem is that the IMF and Saudi money comes with lots and lots of strings attached. And this is something that is now forcing a reckoning in the governing party, because there was the rhetoric, the very simplistic rhetoric, and now there's reality where the IMF says, for instance, if you want our money, you want to, the debt that you're incurring thanks to the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which is a $40 billion investment from China in the country, right? Essentially, the IMF is telling Pakistan, we are not going to give you money to pay back China, so open up your books. And Pakistan does not want to open up its books on China. And Saudi Arabia is telling them, if you want our money, loosen your relationship with Iran. And I don't think Pakistan really wants to get in the middle of the Saudi-Iran controversy to the extent that they can avoid it. Anyway, I don't want to take more of my time, and I guess that's it. Thanks for listening.